Hi, everyone. Erik here for Farmfolio, and I'm joined today by a very special guest, the newest addition to the Farmfolio team, JC Rico. JC is going to be the new point of contact for most of the interested parties coming in looking at farmland. He's going to be sort of leading the charge as people come into our community and assess how farmland fits into their portfolios. So I wanted to sit down with JC today and go over a couple of things, talk about his background, especially because, JC, like a lot of people here internally at Farmfolio, and especially within our community of stakeholders and farm owners, is a very international person who lived in a number of places across the world. I think you said Europe,
Mm,
North America. So coming to us with that international mindset, and we're going to be picking his brain a little bit, sort of about his perspective of the development of these emerging countries, and originally from Mexico.
yeah. Well,
And so we're going to be getting his perspective on that as well. So, JC, what I wanted to start with was just a little bit on your background.
yeah.
What brought you to Farmfolio, sort of what you've been doing professionally, and what made you decide to throw in your chips with a
Mm,
company doing farmland here in a place like Colombia?
okay. Well, yeah. Thanks for having me, Eric. Very happy to be in Medellin for the first time, second time in Colombia, in fact. And it's been fantastic just meeting the team and seeing, everything that's happening over here. A little bit about my background. I am from Guadalajara originally, but like Eric mentioned, I've spent some time abroad. I had the opportunity to live in Australia for a couple of years, in the US and California as well, in France and Brussels. I spent some time there, Canada as well. And yeah, I mean, that I think, like you also said, all the a lot of the folks here have that international background experience, and love to add value through that as well. My studies were in international relations, so kind of one thing led to another. And in terms of my professional background, I've been involved in sales. My background comes from the tech world, as well as many of the folks here at Farmfolio. So yeah, that's kind of where I come from and why I decided to join this project. I guess it was sort of a natural and very organic decision for me. As in my family, again, I'm from Guadalajara, and my family has a tradition of farming. Perhaps not at the scale that I've seen here at Farmfolio, but with even from like my great grandfather in the vicinity of Guadalajara. So I've always been in sort of or have that mindset, at least unconsciously. And having met Oscar a while back and then kind of reconnecting again, it just happened like in the most natural way. So, and specifically, farmland, I think today, as opposed to a few years back, things have changed tremendously, and there is, tremendous need for very specific crops, which probably we'll talk about in a minute. But yeah, I mean, there's a huge opportunity for developing what we're doing here at Farmfolio, and specifically Colombia. I'll give my remarks a bit on what I've seen or what I've been sort of part of, not sort of from the inside, in Mexico, and how that evolved into Mexico becoming number one trading partner for the U.S.,
Yeah.
and how Colombia is on that path, perhaps 5 or 10 years behind what Mexico has been able to achieve in any way.
Sure. I mean, that's something I'd really like to talk about actually, because I think as of the end of September,
Hmm.
Mexico had become, again, because it was before,
Yeah.
the number one trading partner for the United States, which, fits into sort of a geopolitical maneuvering, the distancing from China and sort of the decoupling, they call it, from China, and the United States looking closer to its regional allies in places like Latin America,
Hmm.
to achieve those trade relationships that they need. But the case of Mexico is interesting in particular because, if you looked 15, 20 years ago, the primary exports from Mexico to the United States were mostly agricultural goods.
I mean, yeah, they're still, like, for example, avocado, where I'm from, or even the neighbor state, Michoacan, it's number one producer and export of avocado, berries. But, the focus has shifted definitely, and things are also getting more expensive in Mexico, really, to continue to have that number one spot. And like, probably what's on your mind is that there is sort of a shift, right? And it's coming, like, south, which is why Colombia now is becoming a powerhouse in specific crops, talking about like fruit, lime, coconut, mango, etc. So, the focus now has shifted from Mexico being number one in terms of agro to manufacturing, right? So, the auto industry, the what's the other one? Aeronautical industry.
A lot of aeronautical stuff, yeah. A lot of assembly line stuff.
Very specialized stuff. So anyway, that's happy to see that, and coming here in Colombia, I can definitely feel that Colombia is on the verge of becoming that, or perhaps, I'm not saying not replacing, but perhaps like being able to fill a gap, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Right.
Well, it's interesting to see the development of that sort of, you can think of it almost like the life cycle of these emerging economies, because in Mexico, you had and you're right. I mean, there's still, you see the avocado, especially in all of the stuff that comes out of Mexico. And it's not that it's replaced so much, it's just that it's evolved. You know what I mean? You have these agricultural regions that are now zoned for industrial and manufacturing. And that's become the big strength of the Mexican economy, especially that relationship with the United States. But that agricultural production needs somewhere to go. And so it's coming to the places that logistically and geographically are the most logical, which is Colombia, Latin America, Canada.
Yep.
And the U.S., as it's sort of restructuring its relationships, is looking to these countries to provide these goods, and I think that's interesting. But maybe you could speak a little bit more to the process of that change and really how it affected the value of the underlying assets, which is the land. Most values.
I mean, this is a question that could be answered at so many levels. One being that Mexico and U.S. as a relationship that is so complex, and I'm talking about the people aspect of it. So I've got family, like brothers and very close family siblings that migrated to the U.S. and that's a I share that with a big percentage of many Mexicans, and I'm talking on like every level of society, right? So a lot of people from the cities, but also from the smaller towns, have always sort of moved to the north, and that's created sort of a vacuum of labor, skilled labor in the fields, that now has kind of gone to live or try to live the American dream, or one way or another. So that's definitely created a vacuum of shortage of labor in Mexico, and that continues to happen because it's just people, they need better life conditions,
Sure.
So, but again, like it was sort of a lot of things kind of like in kind of in context, like relationship with China, and then now Mexico becoming and like leveling up in terms of
Right.
technology
and getting a lot of that foreign investment in,
a lot of foreign investment, stability, so on and so forth. So now, like, we've shifted towards manufacturing, and now that's kind of become the number one kind of a economic driver, or at least one of the number main economic drivers for Mexican economy. And the agro is still there, but it kind of has lost, I guess, a little bit of
Yeah.
power.
Well, it's going to need somewhere to go, and another factor is going to be growing conditions. Because Mexico and these equatorial regions have very specific climate conditions and are able to sustain very specific levels of production that really aren't translatable to just anywhere in the world.
No.
You couldn't take that level of production and transplant it to, say, Canada or Eastern Europe or wherever, Southeast Asia, and so it's very logical for it to come here, and you do see it coming here. You see the expansion of the trade relationships between the United States and Colombia, and I think Colombia and Mexico as well have established some pretty strong relations. But it's interesting to think about, the life cycle of farmland specifically. If you look at sort of the peripheral regions of the major cities that are sort of farming areas first, and then they become industrial areas, and then they become urban areas, residential areas. And that cycle has definitely taken place in Mexico.
Oh, yeah.
You saw it firsthand. Yeah. And now it's coming to Colombia. It's a big part of.
And the other aspect that probably we're even more conscious now is the lack of water. We were actually, Dax and I visited some of the fields in Michoacan and the Colima region in the vicinity of Jalisco, and every person we spoke to that was on the field had mentioned that in the last few years, it had gotten even harder to predict the harvest because of the lack of rain.
Sure.
Right. And that's definitely not happening in Colombia, right?
Yeah. No.
I mean, I think I overheard Oscar the other day talking about how Colombia is one of the top countries in the world in terms of precipitation.
It is. So, yeah, I think it's number 2 behind Brazil.
So there you go, right? So things are definitely changing in many levels, in many layers in Mexico. Global warming is definitely one. Again, evolution from agro to manufacturing is another one. So again, the need is not disappearing, right? The markets, Europe, the US,
it's growing.
It's growing. So it needs to be shifted elsewhere.
Yeah.
So I think this is definitely the time for Colombia to become, or it's already happened. It's becoming a powerhouse in specific segments, and lime and coconut, I think is
definitely. And you can see the development happening. I mean, it sometimes starts first in the urban areas, but definitely I think where you get the really high multiples is in the rural areas where you have people coming in. Coffee region is a perfect example. I heard, and I'm not sure this is true, but I heard the other day that they're going to be doing direct international flights to Armenia and Pereira. Well, Pereira already was international, but Armenia would be. And so, it's just reflective of the development of the country and the foreign interest that just now I think is really peaking. I mean, even here in Medellin, what we've seen in terms of property values over the last 4 or 5 years has been pretty incredible. And I think that in the rural areas and the farming areas, that effect will be amplified significantly. I mean, even behind me, you can see that they're doing some construction on this building. It sort of ruined our view of the nice mountains, and I'm pretty bitter about that. But it is reflective of,
it is. I'm actually very excited. Tomorrow we're going to be traveling to some of the farms that are in the area, in the Antioquia area, in Quindío region. So very excited to see it firsthand. I'll be sharing some content with some of the folks I've been having conversations with, and I think just like experience it firsthand, like you have in the past. It just creates this I don't know, like
that's the most powerful thing, right? And seeing is believing.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I bring this up because I am probably going to be even more aware of this development that is already happening in Pereira, Armenia, and how the cities continue to grow, and that in 3, 5, 10 years, the Las Lomas location will probably be rezoned to, residential or commercial, or
sure. And that's where you get the really
exactly
crazy returns. Great. Well, I'm excited to see that. I'm excited to see what you guys are seeing out of the farms and that visit. So hope you guys enjoyed this little conversation with newest member of the Farmfolio team. And do keep an eye out for some stuff coming out of the farms from JC here. And from all of us here at Farmfolio, thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you soon.